Welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. Peter's not with me today. We've had a few scheduling conflicts, and due to his complex schedule, he hasn't been able to, go and see any recent movies, which is why I'm doing this one by myself. I'm just going to cover a bunch of the movies I've seen recently because of the great thing, Movie Pass, that has just come down. For those of you who don't know, I think we talked about it on 30-minute reviews. Movie Pass is a new thing where you can pay $10 a month, and you can go and see one movie a day in standard definition every day of the month that you have paid for, which is fantastic. The only thing is you can't buy movie tickets in advance, so you're kind of just stuck for showings like Star Wars, which are guaranteed to already be sold out. And I haven't bought a ticket yet because I'm going to go the day of and buy a ticket with Movie Pass, and we'll see how that goes for me. But I haven't had too much of an issue with with other things. There's certain movies that you'll buy in advance. Like I went to see Justice League in IMAX. So that wouldn't be covered, obviously, neither with 3D showings. Those you'd want to buy, with that. But if you're going to go see a standard movie, there's no reason not to, especially when it gets to Oscar season like it is right now, and you have a bunch of really, really good movies coming out all at once. It's a great way to, have it on tap, if you will, to go to the movies. They don't sponsor us, by the way, as much as it sounds like they may be sponsoring us. So really there are 4 movies that I want to cover today. We have the first one for the month of November, Thor Ragnarok. We have Justice League. We have Ladybird, which shattered records for highest Rotten Tomatoes score. And recently, which I saw yesterday, The Disaster Artist, which is James Franco's take on the making of The Room. So let's jump right in. Before we really get started, though, I do have one thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if anyone else has used the website. We do have a website. I haven't really talked about it much on this podcast. I've brought it up a few times on 30-minute reviews. We do have an official website. It is 30minutereviews.com. Same as spelling of the core podcast. If you go on that website, we have a great number of things. I have more reviews, more opinion pieces. Occasionally I'll put up a piece about ways you can save money expanding your collection of home media, which I may turn into a standalone podcast too. Just because it's such a useful... That's one of the more useful ones that we do. And also on the website, if you want to support the show... when you go on the website, we do have ads. The website is ad-supported. I believe the podcasts have also been monetized. I'm not entirely sure if it's working or not. I think it is. Because I've been told by Peter that when the podcast came on, he was greeted with a Spanish ad for Wells Fargo. So it is entirely possible that the podcast does have ads running. We don't control what ads are run before the podcast. That's just Spreaker. They select them. We could say, go ahead, run an ad before and then run an ad after. But we don't control what they pick for that. The ones on the website are handpicked. I pick which ads are up myself. So like right now, we have a deal through Fandango. It's not really a deal. It's just a link if you're going to buy Fandango gift cards for the holidays. If you use our link, we get a commission on that for a $50 Fandango gift card. We have a link to purchase Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back from Fandango now for, I believe it's $12.99. I have The Economist. If you're looking for test prep, we have a GMAT tutor prep plan that's a little on the pricey side. But that one also does support us if you do select that. And if you ever grew up with Zoo Books, we have a Zoo Books link for the Penguin issue, which is $6.99. So if you want to do any of those for Christmas, just for yourself, for other people, we have links of that all on our website. And anything there does support all of our shows. And we also have our usual donation box, and we also have my books that I put out myself, and we have a cafe press site with bumper stickers and mugs and stuff like that with the logo on it. So really, if there's anything like that you want to do to support us, then absolutely go ahead. Or you can just tell people to listen, because that would also help us greatly. So on with the movies for this week. So let's start out with Thor Ragnarok, because that was the first one that I saw recently. I don't have my notebook with me. I probably should bring a notebook with me when I go to the movies. I don't do that, but Thor Ragnarok was the third and possibly final entry into the Thor mini franchise within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, telling the story of Thor facing off against the villain Hela and lightly adapting the storyline of Planet Hulk. I did greatly enjoy this movie. It was a very good movie. It was the best of the Thor movies, which isn't saying too much, because I don't get the hatred for I don't get the hatred that came out of The Dark World. I thought it was okay. I've definitely seen worse movies, and it's not terrible, but you can it definitely could have been better. But Ragnarok was fantastic. It really did feel like they just let the director have free reign. I'm not gonna. I can't pronounce his name. I probably should have watched a video where they did pronounce his name at some point prior to this, but I did not. So if he that is you can tell very much that it's his movie, and it's not. They didn't have they didn't have a corporate hand guiding him through the whole thing, like say The Dark World did, or Iron Man 2 did, where you can tell there were things in there that weren't originally in the script and were added in later, and because they're jarringly out of place. This is an interesting way for them to bring in the Hulk, who they can't use in exclusive movies due to usage rights issues between Marvel and Marvel Studios and Universal, where Universal owns the rights to use the Hulk in solo movies in distribution. So in the event that they did want to make a Hulk solo movie, they had to go and actually do they had to give Universal the right of first passage, I believe it's called, where should they want to distribute the movie, Universal does, and they get to keep a good amount of the money in distribution. So that's why since The Incredible Hulk, besides the fact that that was a commercial, not failure, but not a great success, there hasn't been another Hulk movie since. So they worked around that, and I'm sure people at Universal were very upset. They found a way to adapt Planet Hulk into a movie without having to go through them first. And the movie is at its heart a comedy, but I don't think you should expect anything different based on the director. And he does also play Korg, and he does a fantastic job playing Korg too in the movie. Loki is back, but he doesn't really change his character much, and there's even a point they make in the movie where when they're escaping Sakaar, Loki tries to betray Thor. And Thor's like, see, that's the thing, you never change. Like, I've grown and I've changed. And the only thing I don't like about that whole sequence is if you need to tell the audience that your character has changed, then you didn't really convey that the character has changed. The only difference, really, that's palpable toward Thor as a character is that he is he's, like, funnier now than he was in previous movies. I don't really need any more of the Hulk. Like, the Hulk is fine. I don't need Banner. That's the problem. The movie has too much Banner for my taste. And if they were to if they cut out Banner completely, I feel like you wouldn't have lost anything of value from the movie. Because it's not like he really brought anything to it. It's just he's just kind of there. What else did I bring up about this? if you haven't seen it already, you might have missed it in theaters, depending on what theater you go to. It's probably already out, and then by the time Star Wars comes out, it'll definitely be out. But I would recommend seeing it when it comes out on streaming. Definitely see it. But yeah, so it was fantastic. That brings us to the other side of the coin here, and I won't touch on this as much because I did do a full review of Justice League on our website. It wasn't a dumpster fire, which I guess is the nicest thing I can say about the movie. Is I went in expecting worse, which is probably why I didn't mind Batman v Superman as much as I did. Like, Suicide Squad, I went in knowing it was bad, and it was bad. Same thing with Fantastic Four, the 2014 reboot. But for both Justice League and for Suicide Squad and for Batman v Superman, I walked into it with a greater sense of how bad the movie was going to be. And because of that, I went in expecting it to be as bad as, say, Suicide Squad or Fantastic Four, and it wasn't. But there is a lot in this movie that's entertaining, to say the least. And I would say almost entirely the opposite of what I said about Wonder Woman is true here, where the third act is where the movie really shines. I mean, you can tell it's weird because you can tell there are sequences that were put in by Joss Whedon, and they're obvious. The sequence with Martha Kent at the Daily Planet with Lois Lane. That's definitely a Joss Whedon thing, especially the news report with the woman talking about her husband being abducted by aliens. All has his fingerprints all over it. The scene of the Flash landing face first on Wonder Woman's chest. Again, absolutely a Joss Whedon thing. Meanwhile, there are other things that you can tell were Zack Snyder, which I would say is a good amount of the movie is his creation, and you can tell there are two different directors there, and it meshes mostly well. And the entire third act of the movie is where you can sell me. It was like how I felt after Jurassic World, where basically how good the third act of Jurassic World was with the T-Rex fighting the Indominus Rex. You could have had Chris Pratt read me the phone book and then go, okay, now here's the dinosaur fight, and that's it, and I would have been fine with it, because you didn't make me attach to any of the characters where it matters, and then I came here to see a dinosaur fight. That's what I came here to see. At the end of the day, I don't come to a Justice League movie to see what Lois Lane and Martha Kent are up to. I don't come to a Justice League movie to see Batman detectiving. I come to the Justice League to see the Justice League team up and kick someone's ass. That's what you're here for. It's Mark Bernardin said on Fat Man on Batman, this is like the annual comic, where it's like you have the Justice League team up, you have that kind of thing. So it's why in the Avengers there's no real meaningful character development, because you're not meant to have character development here. And it's also why in this movie you don't really get that either. You get the team come together. Now, I do have a few complaints. I'm not going to make it sound like it's a great movie. Number one, same complaint I had about Luke Cage applies here, where Luke Cage going into Defenders, where Luke Cage ends on the note where he goes back to prison. He goes back to Seagate. And then when the Defenders comes back, you have Foggy getting him out. It opens up with Foggy, like, well, all right, Mr. Cage, you're out now. And while him being in prison would have been a great way to start out season 2, and have him go and have him like have to face his past more concretely, that would have been a really good thing to see explored on screen. But we don't really see that, and then we go right to Defenders, and we see him being friends with everyone. We have a similar problem here with Cyborg. And I don't know if it's just a problem with these movies handling black characters, but I'm definitely seeing a trend here, where interesting plot lines are being shafted in favor of crossovers. And in this case, you have Cyborg, whose character is he's characterized in this movie as he's a bit of a loner because of what happened to him, and he got into the accident, and then they used the mother box to put him back together, and he has to come to terms with the fact that he's no longer human, but he's not like he hasn't completely lost his humanity, but he's not really human either. And rather than exploring that in depth in a way that would give you a good story, and it's something that you could contrast with an interesting villain in a standalone, or you can play off of other characters in a Titans movie, like that whole scene in Power Rangers where they have the meeting by the fire when they're all getting to know each other, and they're all trying to come to terms with who they are as people before they become Power Rangers. You could have that kind of thing in a Titans movie, where you have Robin, who's Batman's protege. You can bring in Starfire, Raven. You can bring in all of these characters, and you can have them all play off of each other as they're trying to come to terms with who they are. And I'm hoping without much actual. I don't believe it's going to happen. That New Mutants does that. It's not going to. It's going to be a horror movie. So I for one actually think that they should have devoted more time to Cyborg, or if there was any character that you gave a solo movie before this one, Cyborg should have been the one that came out before Wonder Woman. That's not to say Wonder Woman was bad, or that a Cyborg movie would inherently be good. I'm saying that his backstory is something that should have been more vastly explored going into this before Wonder Woman. Because Wonder Woman, her backstory, you don't really need too much to get into. This movie isn't reliant on Wonder Woman. She's there. You do need to have that, and that's why Cyborg is so heavily featured in the plot. It's because it's because of how much the plot depends upon him, because they went with the New 52 origin where he's fused with a mother box because of the villain being Steppenwolf. Which brings me to my next problem, Steppenwolf as the villain. Steppenwolf should not have been the villain. Steppenwolf should have been a villain in a later movie. Now, we're hearing rumors now that there's an extended cut with where he ends up going back to Apocalypse, and Darkseid kills him, not the parademons, and there's a possibility that happens, and there's a possibility that cut sees the light of day, but who knows at this point. The problem is, you shouldn't keep having to sell me director's cuts of this movie to say the movie is now at least passable. Here's my problem with as a villain, using him as a villain in this, using Steppenwolf as a villain in this movie. If you look at who Steppenwolf is as a villain, he is Darkseid's uncle, who is a general in Apocalypse. Now, if you are uninitiated and you don't know what any of this is, which isn't a bad thing, I mean, the movies are meant to be consumed by millions and millions of people, which is the target audience they should be going with. They shouldn't be going with people who are familiar with the new gods and anything like that. They should be going for the person who's, walking in off the street. The problem is, like, when they chose Loki for the Avengers, you still didn't need to have seen Thor to be able to understand Loki as a character. Because his motivations were made very clear over the course of the movie. Steppenwolf is just a generic world domination, plot line, and that's not great for this. And like, if you have to ask questions, okay, let's pause for a minute. What's Apocalypse? Who is Darkseid? And there are so many additional questions that to go into to explain this character's backstory. There are a ton of other characters you could have used here that would have been better. You could have used Vandal Savage, who I know just had a brief stint on Legends of Tomorrow in Season 1, but really, I don't think anyone watches that show anyway, so it's not that big of a deal if you use him again. You could have used Brainiac. You could have used Darkseid himself. There are so many other characters you could have used that it almost is ridiculous that you choose one of the more complex villains to for this. Now, that said, there was a way to do this right, and they did kind of just hope you wouldn't think about it too hard, I think is the best way that I would put what they did. As long as you don't think about it too hard, you're fine with him as a villain. What they should have done, however, was use a different villain altogether, and that would have solved a great many problems with this movie, including pacing issues and things like that. Now, that brings us to what I really loved about the movie is the third act, which I'm going to say starts with the resurrection of Superman. I've only watched the movie once. I haven't seen it multiple times. When they resurrect Superman, and then he comes back to life, and this is the first time we actually see Superman treated as a character with the power that he has. And because we've seen him in Man of Steel, where he is fighting like an anime character through a city, destroying buildings, and people are dying all around him. And he's not being very Superman-like. He's just being a tank. And then we have Batman v Superman, where we see Superman again, and he is he's told to us that he's a symbol of hope, but we don't really see that. It's never shown as a symbol of hope. We just see people treating him as a god, and we see him kind of brooding through the whole movie. Then he dies, and then here he's resurrected. And here, he tanks the entire Justice League and beats everyone, including the Flash. And that was very satisfying to watch after seeing him get shafted the way he has in both his own solo movie and his first crossover movie. Then he goes off back to Kansas, and he meets up with Lois Lane, and he talks to Lois Lane again, and it sounds like Superman. This is what Superman sounds like. And then he goes off back to Sokovia, whatever it is that he's fighting in, and helps fight Steppenwolf. And that's the point where the movie, this quintilogy of movies that they've released so far, from Man of Steel through here, has never once sold me on a Superman who cared about saving people. This movie does that with the simplest thing. The sequence is that family that they keep showing us for no reason, and it's incredibly annoying. It's a very Joss Whedon thing to do, because there's that waitress in the Avengers, there's the girl and her little brother, or the mother and the son in Age of Ultron, and there's this family in this Eastern European country in this movie. And I don't care about any of these people. I don't know why you need to show me these people. I get the reason why is you're trying to create a relationship to the audience and make them feel something for these characters. But if you're making a movie the right way, then you shouldn't have this problem. So the family is not escaping the parademons and the destruction that the mother boxes are causing. So the Flash runs out and starts pushing the car. And Superman comes up next to him, and he goes, "You get those, I'll get this one." And Flash is like, "Oh, okay." So he goes over, and you see the Flash pushing the car. He pushes it way out of the way. And then he turns his head, and you see Superman carrying an apartment building full of people to safety. And that was where the previous, I'm going to say 3, because they got it right in Wonder Woman, where she was caring about the people. And she's trying to be like an actual hero and not like a hero in the way that they're defeating the bad guys. She's being a hero because she's trying to, her one goal is not self-preservation, which is what Superman's goal was in the previous 2 movies. And that's what makes it different. Wonder Woman's goal was to save all of humanity. Superman's goal in Man of Steel was to save his own life, because Zod was trying to kill him. And then in Batman v Superman, his goal is to defeat Batman before Batman kills him, and then defeat Doomsday before Doomsday kills him. And then only at the very end does he make the decision, I'm going to heroically sacrifice myself to defeat Doomsday. So now you finally get Superman doing that. And then Superman comes in, and we see him use his ice breath, which is a big complaint a lot of people had about him not using that previously. And he actually feels like Superman, and not just some generic, strong, flying guy. He feels like a unique character, which was a huge improvement over his portrayal in the previous movies. The rest of the movie, you have to slog through a lot to get to that point. and you even have the obligatory the team up. They all start fighting with each other at some point because why not? That was thrown in both the Avengers and in Age of Ultron. It didn't come to blows, but it almost did, similar to the Avengers. Now, apparently, if it's true, it feels like it was supposed to be a quadrilogy of movies where it was Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League Part 1, Justice League Part 2. I don't think Part 2 is ever going to be made at this point because of how poorly this movie's doing in the box office. If you get the chance to see this movie, or if you have a movie pass, I would definitely recommend you go see it. It's worth watching purely for the ending alone if you like Superman. And the post-credit scene, the first one with Superman and the Flash, is very good. Which reminds me, this version of the Flash disgusts me on almost every possible level. There is nothing about this portrayal of Barry Allen that is good, comic accurate, or entertaining to say the least. It's disgusting, he's annoying, and he can't run. Like, that's the defining characteristic of the Flash, is that he can run fast, and he runs like a Olympic skater. And that's not a good thing. So that was something that someone should have said, like, that final sequence of him running in the city. That's something that, someone should have been like, okay, pause. Ezra, do you know what a person running looks like? Have you been in a gym class? Even if you didn't do anything in there, which I have a sneaking suspicion he hasn't in his life, have you ever seen someone run? Because that's not how people run. That's how like Mario in Mario Party skates, and that it was infuriating to watch. And the thing is, he doesn't actually do anything the entire movie besides make dumb jokes that aren't funny. So it's just like it's more like cringe-inducing than anything else that's present there. And if I want to go there, the portrayal is closer to that of Wally West, who's a quippy little bastard. Barry Allen doesn't do that. So you know what? You could have just called him Wally West and we would have been fine with it. Or you could have done what everyone else wanted you to do and just fuse in the CW shows, and I think everyone would have been fine with that. Because there were so many other ways you could have handled this. This was the worst way you could have. Jason Momoa and Ray Fisher were both great, though. Unfortunately, Lex Luthor was only relegated to the post-credit scene, even though I thought Joss Whedon said that real movies don't have post-credit scenes. But I guess that went out the window when his previous movie tanked at the box office. So, yeah. Which brings us to our next movie, Ladybird, which just came out. It currently holds the record as the highest-rated movie in the history of Rotten Tomatoes, with a 100 rating out of almost 400, almost 300 reviews, I think. I don't know off the top of my head. But this movie is fantastic. It is, it's a coming-of-age story about this girl. I forgot her real first name. She goes by Ladybird. Coming into adulthood in her senior year in 2002, 2003. I think the movie is good, and I think the movie is great. I think I don't know how to pronounce her name. The girl who plays Ladybird. I think she gets an Academy Award nomination, and I think her mother from Roseanne, the woman who played the sister on Roseanne, who plays her mother, whose name Laurie Metcalf, is definitely going to get a win, if not a nomination, for supporting actress for this movie. They do a fantastic job. The dad plays a great character, is great too. There's a really heartbreaking scene where the son is trying to get his life together and he's trying to get an actual job, and the dad gets out of an interview, and the son is the next person going into the interview, and the son gets the job, and it's the dad. The dad has that. He does a great job of the complex emotions of he didn't get it and he can't provide for his family, but then at the same time, the person who did get it was his own son, and it's such a great scene. But the whole movie is fantastic. My biggest problem is I think that I've said it before. I've definitely said it before. Where you need two viewings to properly review a movie. I think I say as I review 4 movies that I've only seen once each, and And I think that this movie really highlights it. And the reason is, I think it's just because nostalgia is one hell of a drug. And if you look at this movie, it's a good movie. But then as you get closer toward the end, it gets very predictable. And then it's the biggest misdirection the movie makes. There are two huge misdirections, and that's it. One is they talk about abortion, and then I think the next scene or the scene after, she ends up losing her virginity, and it's almost like a layup where it's like, okay, now she's gonna have to get an abortion, but that never actually happens. And then I'm not saying that's for better or for worse. I'm just saying it kind of plays with your expectations a little bit. And then there's another thing where she does finally get to go away to New York for her to go to college. And her first night, she ends up in the hospital. And she goes to a church. And she calls home. And I genuinely thought the movie was going to end with a suicide, but it didn't. Again, not for better or for worse. It just plays with your expectations a little bit. But if you haven't seen the movie already and you hear this, watch when you get to that final scene when she's in the church and then she leaves the church and calls her mom and leaves a message on the voicemail. The first thing I thought is, oh my god, she's gonna kill herself now, or she's gonna try to kill herself. But no, the movie just ends. But besides those two things, the movie is incredibly predictable. Everything else, you just kind of go like, okay, she's gonna abandon her friend and make a new friend. Then she's gonna take back the boyfriend, even though he cheated on her because he's going through complex things because he's gay, but he's in the closet and he goes to a Catholic school. There's a lot in play in the movie that you can kind of you know the characters' arcs before they happen, and usually that doesn't net a movie a 94 on Metacritic. The movie is so good that even with those problems, you can still get it an 85, which is where I would rate this movie. I'd rate it around an 8.5 out of 10. But I think the big reason why this movie is so highly reviewed, and the same reason why The Force Awakens was so highly reviewed, is the nostalgia factor. The average person who's doing a movie review for an institution that can rate to Rotten Tomatoes is going to be around the age where they would have been the same age as Ladybird when the movie came, when in that time. So it gives them a chance to relive their adolescence a little bit, and they can relate to a lot of what happened. Now, the problem with that is it skews the result. That's why The Force Awakens should be around a 75, but I think it's still in the 90s. Because the movie is good, but I've seen it before. So I think it's this is the movie that if you were looking for a reason why you should see a movie twice, then this is why. This is why you should do it. So that's that, and then we'll move on to the final movie that we have on the itinerary, The Disaster Artist, which is the movie about the making of The Room. Now, I really liked the movie. I'm not saying the movie was bad. I think my biggest problem with the movie came from mostly the screening, which is another thing that it's something that I have that maybe other people don't have with this. I don't have the luxury of being able to see these movies in a vacuum. I see it with everyone else, and the impact of the other people around me who are reacting in real time to this movie, it does have an impact on the on the screening itself, and it does change the way you see it. So it's about the making of The Room, and it really does address a lot of the. But the thing is, if you've read the IMDb page trivia for the movie The Room, then you know everything that happens in this movie. Where it's like, from the time they start making the movie, it's a funny movie. It's a great comedy where you have Seth Rogen playing the director of photography, and he's really funny as basically the straight man to all Time Wiseau's antics. And it's even kind of weird to see Jason Mantzoukas at one point play a straight man to how ridiculous James Franco's Tommy Wiseau is, where when he wants to buy the equipment rather than rent it. It really is kind of funny to see how that happens. And the bigger problem with the movie, I think, comes from me, the screening. I would have to see this movie again to really get the to get the full effect, and maybe watch it at home. But for me, I think it really shows a little bit of the cringe factor behind the whole cult following of The Room, where it's like it's kind of weird how much this movie is revered for being as bad as it is, but the fact that the same people who hated it came out to see this and then laughed, and it's just it just felt grating after a while to be sitting in this theater with these people. That said, it's still I still think it's gonna get a Best Picture nomination because the movie is still pretty good. Beyond that, so yeah, I think that's all we're gonna cover for today. Obviously, we're gonna do Star Wars next week. Once I get a showing, I'll be able to give a more concrete time as to when we'll have the episode up. I do look forward to that one. Maybe we'll go back to doing our old way where we do the what's it called? We do a review before, review after. So we'll be back with Star Wars in a few weeks, or next week, not even a few weeks. We're 1 week out from Star Wars, so we'll be back with that. Good night.